Megan Thee Stallion was reportedly taken into custody following an incident where she allegedly tried to harm Klay Thompson. After discovering he had been unfaithful, the situation only gets more intense from there. It seems Megan believed she had finally secured a high-profile partner, an NBA champion with multiple rings, a massive contract, and a reputation that commands respect nationwide. However, things took a turn when Klay Thompson reportedly stood his ground and made it clear he wasn't interested in continuing the relationship. In response, she reacted with total aggression. She immediately took to social media to tarnish his reputation, attempting to frame him as the antagonist and cast herself as the victim in a mess of her own making. But the public has been watching closely, and as she continues to speak out, her narrative is starting to crumble. Today, we're diving into the complete timeline, the history of the relationship, the warning signs, her specific demands, and the fallout. Megan Thee Stallion is actively attempting to dismantle Klay Thompson's career and personal life, and we need to examine exactly what's happening. Let's take it back to the beginning of this story. When Klay Thompson and Megan Thee Stallion first went public, it immediately sparked a conversation because, on paper, they didn't exactly seem like a natural match. You have Klay, a 5-time NBA champion and one of the greatest shooters in basketball history. He's a Golden State Warriors legend who successfully returned from both a torn ACL and a torn Achilles to keep playing at a high level. The man has a proven legacy that most athletes can only dream of. Then you have Megan, a rapper who has recently been facing more controversy than chart success, with a public image that has taken some hits over the last few years. When they started hanging out, people were already skeptical, but Klay is an adult who made his own choice. He decided to give the relationship a chance, and initially things seemed fine. They were spotted out together, she was posting him on social media, and he was physically there. From a distance, it looked like a typical celebrity couple. However, for those paying close attention, and there are always people watching at that level of fame, certain things became apparent very early on. It seemed like Klay wasn't fully invested in the relationship. It's not just a petty observation, it was visible in how they interacted. When you look at the footage and their public appearances, the energy just didn't match. She appeared to be all in, while he seemed present but mentally checked out. He was there physically, but mentally and emotionally, Klay Thompson seemed to be somewhere else entirely. This is where the situation gets interesting, because many fans actually picked up on this before the relationship even fell apart. People on social media and in the comment sections who have an eye for these things were saying early on that Klay didn't look like a man in love. Instead, he looked like someone just going along with the situation, a very specific energy that people can sense, especially when you're a public figure and every move is documented. Fans pointed out that Klay's body language around Megan felt off. He wasn't giving her the look a man gives a woman when he truly sees a future with her. He wasn't leaning in or acting protective, he was just cordial. He was respectful, but being polite and respectful isn't the same thing as being in love, and the public could see the difference. This is a crucial detail because it ties into everything that happened later. Megan seemed to either miss these signs or simply ignore them, and she continued to push the relationship forward as if they were building something lasting. However, it seems Klay already knew where he stood. He wasn't looking to build a future with her. He was not thinking about marriage or envisioning her in his life years down the road. He was simply living in the moment. And eventually, even that was no longer enough for him. Multiple sources close to the situation indicated that Klay had private reservations about the relationship, which he kept to himself. That's just his nature. Klay Thompson isn't someone who creates drama or airs his grievances on the internet. He handles his business quietly and with the class you'd expect from an athlete of his caliber. However, those concerns were very real and continued to grow. A significant factor, perhaps the biggest one, was the financial reality Megan brought into the relationship. This is where the situation truly begins to make sense. Credible reports started gaining traction across various platforms, suggesting that Megan Thee Stallion maintains a lifestyle costing approximately $750,000 per month. That is $750,000 every single month just for her day-to-day expenses, and she was reportedly looking to Klay Thompson to help cover those costs. Let's take a moment to really consider that figure. $750,000 a month translates to $9 million a year just in living expenses. This isn't about investments or long-term growth. It's simply the cost of maintaining her preferred lifestyle. Between hair, makeup, travel, security, housing, staff, events, and a high-end wardrobe, it all totaled $750,000 every 30 days. And she reportedly expected Klay to foot the bill. While Klay Thompson is undeniably wealthy, there is a major difference between being successful and serving as a personal ATM for someone else's luxury spending. That distinction is important. What began to frustrate observers, and clearly Klay as well, was the sense that Megan wasn't contributing a comparable amount to the partnership. To be fair, Megan earned her status in the music industry with successful records, hits, and Grammy wins. That's a fact. However, during the time she was with Klay, her career momentum wasn't quite at the level it once was. The cultural influence she once held at her peak had begun to shift. The constant controversies, legal battles, and issues with public perception were all starting to impact her career standing. During this time, she was essentially asking someone to fund a lifestyle reserved for those at the absolute top of their industry, even though she wasn't currently operating at that level. Observers close to the situation noted that the relationship took on a transactional quality that didn't sit well with Klay. The dynamic felt less like a genuine partnership and more like a financial arrangement. Klay Thompson has competed at the highest level of professional sports his entire adult life, and he isn't the type of person to be used solely as a financial resource. He looks for a partner, and there is a massive difference between the two. As a result, the rumors grew louder. Those familiar with the situation said Klay was uncomfortable with the pressure to sustain such high spending for someone who wasn't his wife, especially someone he wasn't even sure he had a future with. This created significant friction, the kind that doesn't just disappear by ignoring it. What makes this even more complex is that it wasn't just about the finances. While the money was the most obvious issue, the core problem was a fundamental mismatch in what they both wanted. At this stage in her life, Megan needed something specific from a partner. Given the public scrutiny she had faced and the damage to her reputation, she needed stability and an association with someone whose image was untarnished. Consciously or not, she also seemed to need a level of financial security that she could no longer provide for herself as easily as before. Klay, meanwhile, was in his own rebuilding phase, not financially, but personally and professionally. In that frame of mind, the last thing a person wants is to feel like they are being treated as a resource, rather than being valued for who they are. Even fans watching from the sidelines could see the disconnect. Comment sections were filled with people pointing out that Klay looked like he was simply going through the motions. People noticed he looked bored, like a man just counting down the days. As it turns out, they were right, because Klay Thompson eventually did what anyone with sense would do when a situation no longer serves them. He walked away. When the relationship ended, there wasn't a dramatic public confrontation. Klay handled it the way he handles most things, quietly, privately, and without making a spectacle. He dealt with it internally and moved forward with his dignity intact. That restraint and class made the ensuing events even more revealing, because Megan did not handle the breakup the same way. When Klay decided he was finished, Megan didn't take it quietly or process it in private. She didn't move on with grace. Instead, she went straight to the internet, social media, and interviews, basically every platform that would give her a microphone, and started talking. The narrative she began to craft was clearly intended to damage Klay Thompson's reputation. Megan went online and started portraying herself as the victim. She began releasing content and sharing posts that were obviously aimed at Klay, even if she didn't always name him directly. In the modern era of cryptic Instagram posts and interviews where you imply everything without saying it outright, she played the game perfectly. Her fans immediately decoded her posts as being about Klay, and she positioned herself as the woman who had been wronged and abandoned after giving her heart to a man. Her loyal and highly active fan base picked up on this narrative and began spreading it instantly. People who had no actual knowledge of the situation started siding with Megan simply because she was the first to share her version of events. In the world of public perception, the first person to speak often has the advantage, and Megan moved quickly. However, this is exactly where she made a major miscalculation. Those who had been paying attention from the start weren't convinced, because they had watched the relationship unfold in real time. They had seen Klay's body language and heard the reports regarding the financial expectations. When she began sharing her story of heartbreak and betrayal, the pieces didn't fit together. Consequently, a counter-narrative began to spread just as quickly. People started questioning the timeline, discussing the $750,000 monthly expenses, and noting that Megan was silent when the relationship was thriving but suddenly found her voice the moment it ended. That specific pattern, remaining quiet when things are good and getting loud when they fall apart, is something people recognize. It doesn't look like grief. It looks like a strategy. When you look past the drama and the social media spectacles, it becomes clear that Megan was engaged in a calculated image operation. She understood that if this breakup was handled poorly, it could reinforce existing negative narratives about her career slowing down and her public persona shifting. She felt the need to control the story before anyone else could define it for her. She decided to achieve this by casting herself as the victim and Klay as the villain. If she could convince the public that Klay had mistreated her, she would gain sympathy, attention, and the kind of media coverage that maintains relevancy. In today's landscape for public figures, controversy is currency, and drama drives engagement. Megan needed to remain part of the public discourse because her music alone wasn't carrying her the way it once did. The legal issues had already taken a toll, and the cultural wave that propelled her to superstardom was beginning to change. A breakup with an NBA legend provided the perfect opportunity to stay in the spotlight. However, the problem she failed to anticipate is that Klay Thompson's reputation is built on something substantial: championships, loyalty, and years of perseverance through career-threatening injuries. His reputation isn't fragile, and it isn't easily dismantled by cryptic social media posts or pointed comments in interviews. The people who respect Klay do so because of what they've seen him achieve over a decade in the world's most competitive league. That kind of legacy doesn't vanish overnight, and the public saw right through the narrative. In real time, people began challenging Megan's version of events, asking the obvious questions. If Klay was really that terrible, why were you so determined to hold on to him? If he was playing you, why did you seem completely invested while he appeared half-hearted? If you were truly the wronged party, why did you rush to the internet the moment it ended instead of handling it privately? Throughout all of this, and this is perhaps the most telling part of the entire story, Klay Thompson said absolutely nothing. There were no defensive tweets, no interviews, and no cryptic posts. He stayed off social media, remained focused on his career, and let the noise be noise. That silence spoke louder than any of Megan's claims. When you walk away from a situation that isn't right for you with honesty and clarity, you don't feel the need to explain yourself. You already know the truth of what happened. The truth doesn't require a defense. Klay's silence proved he wasn't bothered. Whatever narrative Megan attempted to create wasn't powerful enough to make him feel obligated to explain himself. He is Klay Thompson, a man with 5 rings and one of the greatest comeback stories in sports history. His legacy isn't defined by a failed relationship. This entire situation highlights how dangerous it can be when someone enters a relationship with the wrong motivations. When a person seeks out a partner not for a genuine connection, but for what that person can provide, be it money, status, stability, or relevance, things are bound to go wrong. Relationships built on necessity rather than actual bond are always on borrowed time. When they inevitably fall apart, the person who was there for the wrong reasons is the one who reacts poorly, because they didn't just lose a partner, they lost the resource they were after in the first place. Megan needed this relationship to succeed in a way that Klay simply did not. For her, it wasn't just a romance, it was a lifeline during a very complicated period in her public life. When it finally ended, she lost something she couldn't afford to let go of quietly, so she chose to speak up. However, by rushing to the internet to shape the narrative and try to make Klay look like the villain, she actually revealed more about herself than she did about him. She showed that her first instinct when things don't go her way is to go public and go on the attack. That specific instinct, more than anything Klay Thompson actually did, is what's causing the real damage to her reputation. The general consensus among people following this story, not just the hardcore fans, but regular observers, is that Megan overplayed her hand. They are looking at that $750,000 monthly expense report and questioning who expects a casual partner to fund such a lifestyle. They're also looking at how quickly she took to social media and wondering why someone truly devastated by a breakup would feel the need to perform that pain so publicly. The contrast between Klay's silence and her public outcry has led many to a specific conclusion. Most people believe that Megan Thee Stallion attempted to use Klay Thompson, but he was wise enough to see through it and walk away. Her frustration appears to stem not just from the breakup itself, but from the fact that her plan ultimately failed. For Klay, this is merely a brief chapter in a life defined by far greater achievements. He overcame injuries that would have ended most careers, won multiple championships, and built a lasting legacy in a city that respects him. A failed relationship isn't going to define him. He has already moved on, staying focused and unbothered. For Megan, the situation is different. This incident and her reaction to it fit into a larger pattern that the public has noticed. The controversies are beginning to mount, and the goodwill she earned during her peak years is starting to fade. Every time she responds to a challenge by going online to tarnish someone else's reputation, she loses more of her remaining credibility. Eventually, the music has to be the focus, and the art needs to speak for itself. Right now, at this stage of her career, her music isn't impactful enough to silence the noise surrounding her personal life. Ultimately, one person handled this situation with class, while the other chose chaos. That contrast reveals everything we need to know about both of them. Klay Thompson's silence is his statement, effectively saying he made the right decision and has nothing to prove to anyone. Megan is learning, or perhaps has yet to learn, that the internet isn't always on your side. Making your personal pain public doesn't always result in the sympathy you expect. Sometimes it simply reveals your true character when things don't go your way. How you handle adversity is a reflection of who you really are. Klay emerged from this looking like the man everyone already knew him to be. Solid, quiet, dignified, and completely unbothered. Meanwhile, Megan came out of it looking like someone who needs to take a long, honest look in the mirror. Attempting to damage another person's reputation just to protect your own image isn't a viable strategy. It's a cry for help. Klay Thompson is doing just fine. Make sure to like and subscribe because we're only getting started.